So, are the Philadelphia 76ers NBA championship contenders for the next year? So, if we think of what they did this offseason, they added PJ Tucker, Daniel House, and then traded for D'Anthony Melton. So, I think those were some good offseason moves. They also re-signed Harden to a 1+1 deal with a player option, and the fact that Harden was willing to take a pay cut to try and make this team more competitive, I think is also a good sign. So I would say it's a pretty solid offseason given their cap situation and the amount of assets they have. They still have Thibault, who I feel like they've been trying to trade for a while here, so we'll see what they do with him. But if I think of the starting lineup, I think it's going to be Maxey, Harden, Tucker, Harris, and off the bench, the guys that I trust would probably be Melton, House, and Niang. So, I think they have a really good starting lineup. You think of the backcourt with Harden and Maxey, and then obviously you have Embiid. Off the bench, they probably don't have as much depth as they'd like, but I think, again, they've made some good additions. And I think they've made additions that fix some of their weaknesses. The first one would be rebounding. Despite having Embiid, Harden, the Sixers were actually a pretty weak rebounding team last year, one of the worst in the NBA. And I think adding PJ Tucker and adding Melton, who is a really good rebounder for a guard, is going to help address that. Another thing is toughness. They mentioned it after they went out to the Heat, and they went and got PJ Tucker. I think Melton's also a tough player. I would say the same thing for House. So I think they have addressed that. And I think maybe they can get a little more energy, a little bit more pace. They played at a crawl because Harden is not really a big transition player, neither is Embiid. But between Maxey and Melton, those are two guys that like to get out and run. And I think they can definitely try and get a few more points out of transition, try and get their offense going a little bit more that way. Apart from that, I think Maxey's development is going to be really interesting because I think he's really good and I think he has room to improve. We saw how towards the end of last season, he might have been their second best player, and I think the shooting numbers were really good, and I think this offseason, everything we've seen, I feel like I've seen a couple videos of him hitting a lot of threes in a row, and, off-season videos are always misleading, but I think Maxey definitely has the potential to improve offensively, especially with the shooting, and you think if he does that, and Harden is a little bit better than he was last season, especially towards the end of last season where maybe he was hurt and he definitely really wasn't himself, and he can get back to a level where, okay, he's not prime Harden, but he can still make plays off the dribble. He's still a great passer, of course. He's still a good shooter. To me, that's a really exciting backcourt. And then you pair that with Embiid, who I don't know what more there is to say about Embiid apart from how dominant he is. How we can almost forget just how good he is. Someone who is one of the best post scorers in the NBA, but also has the skill to face up at his size and shoot. And then defensively is also an all-defense type player. To me, that's a very exciting big three if they're all healthy and they all make the steps they need to improve. And then around that, I think they have a good offense because Harris always gets to his high teens and points somehow, and then Tucker is also a good shooter. So I think offensively, you look at their starting lineup, it can be really exciting. And the Harden and Embiid pick and roll, despite Harden not being himself, was still one of the best plays in the NBA last year. So yeah, I think they can be really exciting offensively, especially if Harden's back to himself, and then they obviously have Embiid. If I think of where they'd be in the Eastern Conference, in terms of like a power ranking, I think they'd be behind the Bucks and Celtics. And I think the main reason I say that is because of defense. I think especially the Celtics, we thought how good their defense was, and then the Bucks, they have Giannis and they have Drew, and they just have a nice defensive institution. You look at the Sixers, I think Embiid's a good defender. I think Tucker is still a good defender despite his age, but Maxey, Harden, and Harris are all probably average defenders. Certainly not all defense type players, which, you look at the Bucks and Celtics and their rosters are just full of defensive players. So I think that's why I would have them behind the Bucks and Celtics right now. But I think, they still have a puncher's chance. They still definitely have a chance against both of those teams in the playoffs with Embiid. I feel like NBA fans have been waiting for a Bucks Sixers series for a while now to see Embiid versus Giannis. I think a key matchup in that one would be Harden versus Drew Holiday. So I think the Sixers, I wouldn't put them in the top tier of NBA championship contenders because of their defense, but I think, second tier, third tier, they're definitely somewhere in there, and they definitely have a chance because of how good they can be offensively and how good Joel Embiid is. Thanks you for watching. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more NBA content like this.